Welcome to Scope Atlas. We delve into the secrets lost in the depths of time, the truth intertwined with mythology and history's greatest mysteries. If these journeys into the unknown intrigue you, please lean back, relax, and join the exploration. Now, tonight's story begins. The buried secrets of the ancient world. Some faded into myth. Others were simply erased from the pages of history. But some places remained, whispered only by name, lingering in memory for centuries. They were civilizations that succumbed to the power of time and nature, yet there is one story. One that might be both real and the source of humanity's greatest legend. This is one of the oldest known disaster stories, and the story of a place thought to be the origin of the biggest lost city myth. Close your eyes and let yourself drift into the complex, enchanted Mediterranean landscape of the 4th century BC. We are diving deep into the silent, muddy memories of a sunken city. Its name is Helike. It was founded in the 8th century BC as the capital of the Achaean League. It was a powerful city-state and a center for maritime trade. But what distinguished Helike was not its political power or its wealth. It was its unique relationship with Poseidon, the god of the seas and thunder. Helike was the most sacred, most magnificent cult center dedicated to Poseidon in all the Mediterranean. In the city's heart stood a towering temple of white marble dedicated to the god. This temple was so important that pilgrims flocked here from all across the Mediterranean. Helike was known as the favorite of Poseidon. It was as if it were protected by the sea itself. This devotion shaped the city's entire identity, its every rhythm of life. The people of Helike lived in the security and prosperity that they believed Poseidon had granted them. The sea was their source of livelihood and the home of the deity they worshipped. However, this proximity also carried an immense risk. The story of Helike is the story of this dangerous relationship with the gods. Wouldn't getting too close to a god invite the risk of incurring that god's wrath? Now, let us move forward slightly. When Helike was at its peak of glory, a terrible thing happened in 373 BC. The city was wiped off the map in a single night. By the sheer violence of nature, centuries later, the philosopher Plato spoke of a legendary continent filled with lost wisdom, Atlantis. Plato wrote that this great maritime empire sank into the depths of the sea in one day and one night due to the wrath of the gods. The story of Atlantis has captivated human imagination for millennia. But could the seeds of this legend have been inspired by a real event known during Plato's time? The destruction of Helike. Helike, a city swallowed by water dedicated to Poseidon. Atlantis, an empire destroyed by water, descended from Poseidon. The terrifying end common to both stories suggests that this lost city could have been the prototype for the Atlantis legend. In the next section, we will delve into the last warnings, before Helike's destruction and the single, terrifying night of the catastrophe. Helike was not merely a port town. It was the heart of the Achaean League. Starting from the 8th century BC, this union of cities along the coast formed an important counterbalance on the Greek political stage. Helike spearheaded the foundation of this league, becoming its political and military epicenter. The city's ports were not just intersections for commercial goods, but also for Mediterranean cultures. The silver coins minted in Helike were a symbol of the region's stability and economic power. It was a safe haven for sailors and a paradise for merchants. This prosperity was reflected in the city's architecture and art. Ruled by ephors and a council, Helike possessed a structure that was surprisingly democratic and organized for its time. This political stability allowed Helike to experience a brilliant era in art, philosophy, and architecture. It was not just a powerful city, but a wise one too. Life in Helike. The daily routines, the hustle of the city market, the philosophers' debates in the agora, all unfolded in a tranquility brought by prosperity. The ceramics used, the fabrics woven, and the houses built reflected the highest standards of Greek craftsmanship during that era. The Temple of Poseidon in particular was breathtaking. Built of marble in the Doric order on the city's highest point, this magnificent structure was visible for miles from the sea. Inside the temple, legend has it, stood a colossal bronze statue of Poseidon, the city's protector. The statue's eyes gazed out at the ocean waves. This imposing presence was the most concrete evidence of how intimately the people of Helike lived with their god. Children played along the city walls while elders sat on terraces overlooking the harbor, watching merchant ships come and go. It was a cycle of life that was glorious, secure, and believed to be under the protection of the gods. No one could have imagined that this peace and beauty could be taken away in a single night by Poseidon himself. Like all great catastrophes, the destruction of Helike did not come out of nowhere. Nature itself began to announce the terrifying end it was approaching. But people often tend to ignore the greatest warnings. First, religious signs began. Oracles at a temple of Poseidon began whispering strange and ominous prophecies. The city's leaders worried that divine wrath was approaching because they had not shown enough respect to their god. Then, the animals began to change. Historians of the time recorded that flocks of rats, snakes, and other small creatures began abandoning the city. They had picked up on the warning signals coming from deep within the earth, signals that humans could not perceive. The animals were seeking safe havens. But perhaps the most disturbing omen came from the sky. At night, by the sea, a strange and bright pillar of fire was seen rising. This phenomenon, to some, was a prophecy. To others, it was a physical manifestation of Poseidon's burning anger. These oddities and fears slowly formed a cloud of tension over the city, but no one could have imagined the scale of the disaster hidden behind these silent signs. On that winter night in 373 BC, the sky was clear, the wind was still. The terrible event began with a great earthquake. The tremor was one of the most violent ever recorded up to that time. Not just Helike, but surrounding cities were shaken. The earth groaned as if some giant thing beneath it were being torn apart. The massive marble columns of the temple of Poseidon cracked. The walls of houses collapsed with a great roar. People rushed into the streets in a panic. This chaos was unimaginable even for that era. However, the worst disaster was not the earthquake itself. Immediately after the tremor, the sea waters in the Gulf began to recede quickly and abnormally. Harbors and rocks were exposed. This was a second wave of horror for those who had survived the shaking. This was the sea taking a breath, the final moment of silence before delivering its greatest blow. The receding sea then returned as a massive tsunami. Historians struggled to find words to describe the size and speed of this colossal wall of water. The huge mass of water quickly embraced Helike. The city and its inhabitants were not just drowned, they were covered by tons of water and mud. The city was pushed deep into the underlying layers of sand and silt on the seabed. Water and earth swallowed Helike in an instant. When the sun rose that morning, Helike was gone. Only sea and mud remained. The city's location was neither a harbor nor a landmass, merely a shadow. This was not just an architectural destruction, but the destruction of collective memory. Poseidon's temple, his bronze statue, and all the glory of Helike were buried in a tomb beneath the sea. This layer of mud, this stratum of tragedy, would protect the city from the effects of time, sealing it until it was rediscovered more than 2,000 years later. For hundreds of years after it sank, Helike existed only as a shadow. Sailors passing through the area where the glorious city once stood would whisper tales of a mournful statue of Poseidon, visible beneath the waters. These stories transformed into more of a ghost tale than reality. It was during this era of forgetting that the philosopher Plato wrote of the mythical continent of Atlantis. Plato lived just a few decades after the destruction of Helike. The story of a powerful civilization swallowed by the sea in a single day and night. What a perfect foundation for the fictional Atlantis that Plato crafted. The geographical catastrophe experienced by Helike, the combination of fault lines, earthquake, and tsunami, was shockingly similar to Atlantis' description of annihilation in one day and one night. Helike would remain for millennia merely as the real lost city that inspired the Atlantis legend. The rediscovery of Helike was the result of one archaeologist's persistent and long-held dream. In the late 20th century, Dr. Dora Katsanopoulou and her team believed that the city's location could be found not through rumors, but through scientific methods. Decades of geological research, analysis of the region's tectonic structure, and examination of the mud layers were undertaken. And finally, the miracle happened. The city was found not under the sea waters, but buried beneath the deep silt and alluvium layer of an ancient lagoon bed. This mud layer had preserved Helike in an incredible state. Just as volcanic ash preserved Pompeii, Helike was sealed by oxygen-deprived silt. The fact that even wooden structures and daily artifacts remained intact meant that time itself had been frozen. Archaeologists had stepped into a life that had suddenly stopped 2,000 years ago. This discovery did not just give us back Helike. It also showed that the Atlantis legend might not just be a myth, but the reflection of a terrifying historical reality. Poseidon's wrath was not a product of mythology, but the inevitable consequence of geology. The story of Helike. This lost city provides humanity with one of its greatest lessons. It demonstrates how fragile we are against the forces of nature, regardless of our technology, power, or faith. At the same time, Helike reminds us that behind myths and legends, there can always be a core of reality. Sometimes, the most unbelievable stories are the most truthful ones, buried deep beneath the earth's muddy layers. This lost city is a silent warning lying deep beneath the waves. Thank you for joining us on this journey spanning millennia. Now, what do you think? Could Helike truly have been the source of the Atlantis legend? Thank you for joining us on this deep journey through time and legend. Here at Scope Atlas, we will continue to find the untold stories hidden in every corner of history. You can be a part of this mysterious expedition by subscribing to our channel and sharing this video. We look forward to seeing you in our next deep analysis. Thank you for joining us on this deep journey through time and legend. Here at Scope Atlas, we will continue to find the untold stories hidden in every corner of history. You can be a part of this mysterious expedition by subscribing to our channel and sharing this video. We look forward to seeing you in our next deep analysis